The Keldari battle cruiser shuddered as another blast tore through its hull. Commander Valka Voreth gripped the navigation controls, her silver eyes narrowing as warning lights flooded the cockpit. 3 enemy vessels pursued her damaged scout ship, the remnants of an ambush that had claimed her entire squadron. Systems failing. Atmospheric entry imminent, the ship's AI announced with mechanical calm. Valka snarled, revealing sharp canines. Her violet-tinged skin, marked with the ceremonial scars of 100 victories, glistened with sweat as she fought to maintain control. She was the most decorated warrior of the Keldari Dominion, undefeated in ritual combat, feared across 3 star systems. Yet here she was, plummeting toward an insignificant blue planet on the galaxy's edge. Reroute all power to shields, she commanded. Plot crash coordinates in lowest population density area. Earth. A primitive world the Dominion had only recently discovered. Its inhabitants were soft, fragile creatures who had barely reached their own moon. To die here would be the ultimate dishonor. The ship carved a fiery path through Earth's atmosphere, systems failing one by one until Valka could only brace herself for impact. The last thing she saw before blackness claimed her was a dense forest rushing up to meet her. Jason Parker wiped sweat from his brow as he hiked the mountain trail. At 34, he'd spent the last decade teaching wilderness survival skills after leaving his military career behind. The remote Montana woods were his sanctuary, far from the memories of combat that still haunted his dreams. The ground trembled beneath his boots. A sonic boom cracked the sky open, followed by a streaking light that disappeared behind the ridge ahead. Whatever it was hit with enough force to make the pines sway. What the hell? Jason muttered, instinctively dropping into a crouch. Curiosity overcame caution. He moved quickly through the underbrush toward a plume of smoke rising above the treeline. Years of training kept his footsteps silent, his senses alert for danger. The crash site was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Metal unlike any earth alloy had carved a trench through the forest, still glowing with residual heat. The craft's design was impossible, no seams, no rivets, just flowing lines that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A section of the hull had split open. Inside, something moved. Jason approached cautiously, hunting knife in hand. What emerged from the wreckage froze him in place. For despite her alienness, she was unmistakably female, stood nearly 7 feet tall. Her skin was a pale violet, marked with intricate patterns that might have been tattoos or natural markings. A mane of silver-white hair framed features that were almost human, yet sharper, more predatory. Blood of a startling blue color trickled from a gash on her forehead. Her eyes locked onto him, vertical pupils in pools of liquid silver, and she snarled a challenge in an incomprehensible language. She lunged forward but stumbled, clearly injured from the crash. "Easy," Jason said, holding up his empty hand while keeping the knife low. "I'm not looking for trouble." The alien warrior drew herself up, towering over him despite her injury. She spoke again, her voice a resonant contralto that seemed to vibrate the air between them. Jason shook his head. "I don't understand." She touched a device at her throat, grimacing. The next words were recognizable, though heavily accented. "Human. This territory. Yours?" "I guess you could say that," Jason replied, stunned that communication was even possible. The warrior swayed slightly, pride visibly battling exhaustion and injury. "I am Commander Valka Voreth of the Keldari Dominion. By right of combat, I claim sanctuary." Then her silver eyes rolled back, and the mighty alien warrior collapsed at Jason's feet. Jason's cabin sat nestled against the mountainside, isolated and self-sufficient, perfect for someone who valued solitude. Now, it housed the most extraordinary guest Earth had ever known. Valka regained consciousness on his worn leather couch, immediately springing to a defensive stance despite her injuries. Her silver eyes darted around the unfamiliar environment, assessing threats and escape routes with military precision. "Your wounds need treatment," Jason said calmly, keeping his distance. "I brought you here from the crash site." The translator at her throat crackled. A Kaldari warrior needs no assistance from prey species. Despite her words, blood still seeped from gashes along her side, and one arm hung awkwardly, dislocated, Jason guessed. Her breathing was labored, suggesting possible internal injuries. "Maybe not," he replied, "but even warriors need shelter while they heal." He gestured toward the windows where rain now lashed against the glass. "Your ship is a wreck, night's falling, and there's a storm. Staying here is tactical, not weakness." This reasoning seemed to reach her. Valka straightened, wincing slightly. "You speak with a warrior's pragmatism for a human. What do you call yourself?" "Jason Parker." "You will address me as Commander Voreth." Jason merely nodded, hiding his amusement. "Commander, your shoulder is dislocated. I can reset it, or you can continue with reduced combat effectiveness." Her silver eyes narrowed, but she extended her injured arm. "Proceed." Jason approached carefully. Even wounded, Valka radiated danger. Her musculature was dense beneath her violet skin, and the ceremonial scars he'd noticed earlier formed patterns that spoke of countless battles. Close up, he could see that what he'd taken for armor was actually an exoskeleton-like carapace covering vital areas. "This will hurt," he warned, positioning his hands. "Pain is irrelevant." With a quick movement, he reset the joint. Valka didn't flinch, though her jaw tightened. "Who pursues you?" Jason asked, stepping back. Surprise flickered across her alien features. "You are observant for a human. The Nixari Collective, scavengers who violate territory boundaries. They attacked my squadron at the edge of your solar system. Over the following days, an uneasy coexistence developed." Jason provided food and medical supplies, though Valka insisted her biology could assimilate Earth nutrition with minimal difficulty. She spent hours each day attempting to repair her communication device, hoping to contact her people. Jason found himself studying her when she wasn't looking. Despite her intimidating presence, there was something compelling about Valka. She moved with predatory grace, economical and precise. Her culture clearly prized strength above all, yet she displayed a keen intelligence that belied the simple warrior stereotype. One evening, as rain continued to drum against the roof, Jason returned from checking his perimeter to find Valka examining his bookshelf. "Your species documents conflicts extensively," she observed, holding a history of World War II. "We try to learn from our mistakes." "Curious. The Kaldari record victories, not failures." She replaced the book carefully. "Your dwelling contains no tribute markers. No battle trophies. Yet you move like one trained for combat." Jason stoked the fireplace. "I was a soldier once. I've had enough of war." "A warrior abandons the glory of battle?" Confusion creased her alien features. "There's no glory in watching friends die," he said quietly. "Only survival and nightmares." Valka studied him with those unsettling silver eyes. "On my world, to speak of battle fatigue would mean execution. Weakness cannot be tolerated in the Dominion. Is it weakness to question whether there's more to life than fighting?" Jason challenged. For once, the mighty alien commander had no immediate response. She turned to stare into the fire, its light playing across her violet features. "Your world is confusing," she finally said. "Your species appears physically inferior, yet you've survived despite numerous predators and environmental challenges. You build isolated dwellings like this one, yet form complex societies. You train for war, then choose peace." Jason smiled slightly. "We contain multitudes. The Dominion teaches that complexity breeds weakness. Clarity of purpose creates strength. And what is your purpose, Commander? Valka's expression shifted, something almost vulnerable crossing her features before her warrior's mask returned. To survive, she answered. And to return to the stars where I belong. But for the first time in her life, the conviction behind those words felt uncertain. The first sign of trouble came at dawn. Valka jolted awake, her enhanced senses detecting something Jason couldn't perceive. She moved to the window with preternatural speed. We must leave. Now. Her voice left no room for question. Jason was already packing, military instincts kicking in. What is it? Nixari scout drones. They've traced my ship's energy signature. Valka strapped on the few functioning pieces of her battle armor. They will send ground forces next. What exactly are we dealing with? Jason stuffed survival gear into his backpack. The collective uses cybernetically enhanced hunters. Relentless. Efficient. Her silver eyes met his. They do not take prisoners, Jason Parker. The use of his first name wasn't lost on him. Good thing we won't be here then. They slipped out through a hidden cellar exit Jason had installed years ago, a paranoid precaution that now proved prescient. The morning mist provided cover as they moved through the forest, away from both the cabin and the crash site. Your familiarity with evasion techniques suggests more than standard military training, Valka observed as they crossed a stream to mask their scent. Special forces, Jason replied curtly. Taught survival and resistance techniques before I became an instructor. A faint smile crossed Valka's alien features. Perhaps humans have some warrior merit after all. They paused on a ridge overlooking the valley. In the distance, 3 metallic spheres hovered over Jason's cabin. As they watched, a beam of energy reduced the structure to smoldering ruins. Nixari purifier drones, Valka explained. They'll track us through thermal signatures next. Then we need to mask our heat. Jason led them toward a series of caves he knew from previous expeditions. Underground, their sensors will be compromised. The cave system stretched for miles beneath the mountains. Cold, damp, and treacherous, but it offered protection from aerial surveillance. They navigated by the light of Jason's tactical flashlight and the faint bioluminescence of Valka's eyes, which glowed softly in the darkness. You move well through these passages, Valka noted. Most Keldari would find such enclosed spaces challenging. Claustrophobic? We evolved on open plains. Our warriors prefer space to maneuver. Jason smiled. That's our advantage then. My training specialized in operating in hostile environments. The more uncomfortable it is for most people, the better I function. They emerged briefly near a waterfall, needing to cross an exposed section. Valka suddenly pushed Jason down, her body covering his as a metallic projectile whizzed overhead. Seeker round, she hissed. They've found us. From the tree-line emerged a figure, humanoid but wrong somehow. Its movements were too fluid, too precise. The skin had a reflective quality, and where eyes should be, glowing red sensors pulsed. Nixari hunter, Valka whispered. Enhanced with biomechanical implants. Jason reached slowly for his hunting rifle. Valka's hand stopped him. Conventional weapons are ineffective. I will engage while you flank right. Aim for the central processing node at the base of its skull. Before Jason could protest, Valka launched herself at the hunter. What followed was unlike any combat Jason had witnessed. The alien warrior moved like liquid lightning, her strength allowing her to rip through metal components. But the hunter adapted quickly, its systems reconfiguring to counter her attacks. Jason circled behind, knife in hand. The hunter, focused on the greater threat, didn't register his approach until his blade plunged into the exact spot Valka had indicated. The creature convulsed, its systems failing. There will be others, Valka said, examining a deep gash in her arm where the hunter had landed a blow. The collective never sends just one. Jason tore a strip from his shirt to bind her wound. We need a more permanent solution than running. Agreed. The crashed ship contains a beacon array. If I can modify it, I might contact my fleet. Their eyes met, an unspoken understanding passing between them. They were no longer reluctant allies but partners fighting for survival. As night fell, they made camp in a hidden ravine. Valka studied Jason as he efficiently prepared their shelter, his movements economical and purposeful. You're different from other humans I've observed, she said finally. How many have you actually met? He asked. None before you. But we study potential conquest targets extensively. Jason froze. Conquest? Valka looked away. The Dominion expands through strength. That is our way. And Earth? Was being assessed. Her silver eyes reflected the moonlight. That classification may require reconsideration. Something had changed in the alien commander. The certainty that had defined her existence was eroding, replaced by questions she'd never thought to ask. And as they huddled together for warmth in the wilderness, pursued by a common enemy, those questions only multiplied. 3 days of evasion led them deep into the wilderness. The Nixari hunters had grown more numerous, forcing them to change direction multiple times. An abandoned ranger cabin, nearly hidden by overgrowth, offered temporary sanctuary. We can't keep running, Jason said, securing the perimeter with traps he'd fashioned from available materials. We need to reach your ship and activate that beacon. Valka nodded, wincing as she examined a deep laceration across her torso, a parting gift from their last encounter with the hunters. Despite her remarkable physiology, even she had limits. The damage is significant, she admitted reluctantly. My healing processes are slowed by this planet's atmospheric composition. Jason approached with his first aid kit. Let me. For once, she didn't object. As he cleaned and dressed her wound, Jason noticed intricate patterns beneath her exoskeletal armor, not scars as he'd first thought, but something more like tribal markings that seemed to pulse faintly with her heartbeat. These markings, he asked, what do they mean? Valka's expression softened slightly. They tell the story of my lineage. My victories. My purpose. She hesitated on the last word. You don't sound convinced of that purpose anymore. Her silver eyes met his. The Keldari believe that strength comes from certainty. But since meeting you, she struggled with the unfamiliar concept. You fight without conquest as your goal. You show compassion without seeking advantage. These things are anathema to everything I was taught. Jason finished bandaging her wound, his hands lingering longer than necessary. Maybe strength comes in forms your people haven't recognized. A comfortable silence settled between them as night fell. The small cabin, warmed by a carefully controlled fire, became a haven against both the wilderness and their pursuers. For the first time since her crash landing, Valka seemed to truly relax. Tell me about your world, Jason said as they shared a meal. Not the Dominion's conquests, but your life. Valka looked startled by the request, then thoughtful. I was bred for combat, selected for genetic optimization before birth. My first memory is of training with blade weapons. My second is of defeating an opponent twice my size. A faraway look crossed her face. There was no childhood as humans understand it. Only preparation for war. No family. No relationships beyond military. Attachments are considered vulnerabilities to be exploited. They are discouraged. Her voice held a note of something Jason hadn't heard before, regret, perhaps. That sounds lonely. Loneliness is irrelevant to a warrior's function. The words sounded rehearsed, a mantra repeated until believed. Jason moved closer, drawn by something neither could fully articulate. Is it? Even human soldiers need connection, purpose beyond the fight. What purpose sustained you, Jason Parker? At first, protecting others. Then, when that wasn't enough, teaching others to survive. His eyes reflected the firelight. But there were empty spaces even that couldn't fill. The distance between them had shrunk imperceptibly. Valka's silver gaze studied him with newfound intensity. Your species is physically weaker than mine in every measurable way, she said softly. Yet you possess a different kind of strength that we never accounted for. A resilience that comes from connection rather than isolation. Is that so terrible? Jason asked. It is dangerous. Her voice dropped lower. Dangerous because it makes me question everything. Whatever barrier had existed between them, alien and human, warrior and survivor, dissolved in that moment. Jason reached out, his fingers brushing against the markings on her arm. To his surprise, they pulsed brighter at his touch. They respond to emotional states, Valka explained, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. Another weakness my people try to conceal. Not weakness, Jason countered. Humanity. Their first kiss was hesitant, exploratory, two beings from different worlds discovering each other. Valka's lips were warmer than human temperature, her skin smoother under his fingers. When they parted, the markings across her body glowed with an intensity that illuminated the cabin. This changes everything, she whispered. Their second kiss held no hesitation, only certainty. As clothing and armor fell away, they discovered each other's bodies with wonder and growing desire. Her strength matched his experience, creating a harmony neither had expected. The connection between them transcended the physical, touching something primal and true. Later, as moonlight filtered through the cabin's single window, they lay entwined, her violet skin against his tanned human form. Valka traced the scars on his chest, battle wounds from his military past. My people would consider this the greatest defeat, she mused. To surrender to feelings. Jason smiled against her silver-white hair. And what do you consider it? Valka's expression held wonder as she answered, the first true victory of my life. Dawn broke with the distant hum of engines, not the mechanical whir of Nixari hunters, but the resonant pulse of Keldari warp drives. Valka stood at the cabin window, her posture a mixture of relief and apprehension. My fleet has arrived, she said softly. They must have tracked my emergency beacon. Jason joined her, noting how she didn't pull away when their shoulders touched. That's good news, isn't it? You can go home. Her silver eyes remained fixed on the horizon. Home. The word sounded hollow now. I'm not certain what that means anymore. For days had passed since they'd managed to reach her crashed ship and activate the long-range communications array. For days of waiting, of conversations that stretched into the night, of discovering each other in ways neither had anticipated. For days that had changed everything. They'll expect a report, Valka continued. About Earth. About its suitability for integration into the Dominion. The unspoken question hung between them. Jason waited, allowing her the space to find her own answer. We should go, she finally said. They'll send search parties soon. They gathered their few belongings in silence. The connection between them had grown too profound for simple words. As they prepared to leave their sanctuary, Valka suddenly grasped Jason's hand. Whatever happens, she said, know that you have changed me, Jason Parker. In ways my people would consider treason. His fingers intertwined with hers. And you've changed me. I was hiding from life before you crashed into mine. The journey to the rendezvous point took them through terrain now familiar to both. They moved as one unit, anticipating each other's movements, communicating with glances rather than words. The Nixari threat seemed to have withdrawn, either defeated or retreated once the Keldari fleet arrived. They crested a ridge overlooking a vast clearing where 3 Keldari vessels had landed, sleek, predatory ships that made Valka's crashed scout look minuscule by comparison. Dozens of warriors had established a perimeter, their armor gleaming in the sunlight. "Wait here," Valka instructed, her commander's voice returning. "Let me speak with them first." Jason nodded, understanding the protocol even as his heart clenched at the thought of her leaving. He watched as she strode confidently toward her people, her bearing regal despite the earth clothing she now wore alongside her salvaged armor pieces. From his hidden position, he observed the reunion. A tall male, distinguished by elaborate armor, approached Valka with a formal salute. Their conversation was too distant to hear, but the body language spoke volumes. The male's posture conveyed authority and expectation. Valka's responses appeared measured, controlled. More officers joined them, forming a circle around her. Data tablets were produced, questions asked. Jason recognized a military debriefing when he saw one. An hour passed. The sun climbed higher. Jason remained motionless, patient as only someone with his training could be. Finally, Valka broke away from the group and walked toward the ridge. Her face was unreadable as she approached. "Fleet Commander Drax has ordered preparations for departure," she said formally. "The Nixari have been driven from this sector, but they will return with reinforcements." "I see." Jason kept his voice neutral. "And Earth status?" "I've submitted my assessment." Her eyes met his, something fierce burning within their silver depths. "I reported that this planet harbors unexpected strength and complexity. That its inhabitants deserve further study before any classification decisions." Relief washed through him. "So Earth is safe? Your people won't invade?" "For now." A smile tugged at her lips. "I may have emphasized certain environmental hazards and resistance capabilities. The Dominion prefers easier conquests." "Clever warrior. I've also." She hesitated, requested a new assignment. "As cultural liaison to Earth. To establish diplomatic relations rather than military assessment." Jason's heart skipped. "And?" "It was granted, with conditions." Her expression grew serious. "I would be the first Keldari to choose such a role. The first to suggest alliance over conquest. This path will not be easy. The best paths rarely are." Jason stepped closer. "What conditions?" "I must provide regular reports. Maintain Keldari protocol. And..." Her voice softened, "would need a local guide. Someone who understands both wilderness survival and human culture." Hope bloomed in Jason's chest. "I might know someone qualified." Valka's markings pulsed with emotion as she closed the distance between them. "The Dominion teaches that to choose connection is to choose weakness," she whispered against his lips. "But standing here, feeling what I feel for you, this is the greatest strength I've ever known." "Then we'll be strong together," Jason replied, drawing her into an embrace. Between two worlds. Behind them, the Keldari fleet prepared for departure, leaving behind one commander who had discovered that true conquest wasn't of territories but of hearts. And as they walked hand in hand toward an uncertain future, alien warrior and human survivor, they carried with them the knowledge that some forces transcend the boundaries between stars. In the vastness of the universe, they had found each other. And nothing would ever be the same.